Step out of the vehicle. This car is flagged as stolen.
Officer, I'm Senator Kimberly Martinez. Here's my Senate ID.
I need you out of the car.
I'm getting out.
Yeah.
I'm also asking you on camera what specific facts gave you reasonable suspicion for this stop.
Just step to the rear of the vehicle.
You haven't looked at my ID once. I look like a thief to you. Make sure that camera's running.
Kimberly Martinez was merging onto Interstate 5 northbound, coffee in the cup holder, Senate briefing notes on the passenger seat, running 4 minutes ahead of schedule, always, when Officer Chad Miller, badge 4471 of the California Highway Patrol, lit up his cruiser behind her and radioed in a stolen vehicle report on her Tesla. What Officer Miller didn't know was that the woman behind the wheel was a California state senator, a Stanford-trained civil rights attorney, and had spent 11 years writing the exact laws he was paid to enforce. What started as a routine morning commute would end with a $7.4 million settlement, Miller's termination, and dashcam footage that 40 million people would watch before the week was over. Before we go further and what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where this community reaches. If you believe that driving a luxury car while black should never be probable cause, like this video and subscribe. Because what you're about to see is exactly why that fight is not over. Kimberly Martinez was 39 years old when this happened. She had graduated Stanford Law, litigated over 200 civil rights cases, and served 11 years in the California State Senate, most of them spent authoring police accountability legislation. She was a first-generation college graduate, daughter of a teacher and a Navy veteran. Married with 2 children, she had never been arrested. Her entire career had been built inside the system, defending it, reforming it, believing it could be better. On a Wednesday morning at 8:42 a.m., she was driving herself to work. Officer Chad Miller had been with the California Highway Patrol for 6 years. In that time, he had accumulated 4 civilian complaints, each one alleging racial profiling or unlawful stops. Each one dismissed for insufficient evidence. Internal notes from his file used a specific phrase, pattern of aggressive discretionary stops. His body camera was running. His dash cam was running, and in the next few minutes, both would record the kind of constitutional violation that turns a career into a cautionary briefing. A 2020 Stanford study found that black drivers in California are stopped at nearly twice the rate of white drivers and are significantly more likely to be searched, despite being less likely to be found with contraband. The data calls it disparity. The people living it call it Tuesday morning. What you're about to watch is what happens when 6 years of unchecked discretion meets 11 years of public service, and a dash cam that never blinks. Kimberly Martinez had been up since 5:15 that morning. She'd reviewed 2 committee briefs over coffee, walked her youngest to the bus stop, and answered 3 constituent emails before 7 a.m. By 8:30, she was on the road, windows up, NPR low in the background, the kind of quiet that Sacramento commuters learn to protect. She was wearing a navy blazer over a white-collared shirt. Her Senate identification badge was clipped to the visor above her head, visible through the windshield. She was driving her own Tesla Model S, registered in her name, insured, current on every document the state required. She looked exactly like what she was, a legislator heading into work on a Wednesday. She was thinking about a floor vote scheduled for 10 a.m., a police oversight amendment she'd been negotiating for 7 months. She had done this commute hundreds of times. Same stretch of I-5, same lane. Never a second thought. The highway was open ahead of her. Moderate traffic, clear skies, dry asphalt. Other commuters held their lanes. A rideshare driver 2 cars back was running his second fare of the morning. She didn't notice the CHP cruiser sitting on the shoulder near the Elk Grove interchange. She didn't notice it ease into traffic behind her. She didn't notice it close the distance. Steady, deliberate, over the next quarter mile. She was thinking about the vote. In California, black drivers are 35% more likely to be pulled over than white drivers making the same commute, on the same roads, in the same vehicles. The disparity doesn't narrow when the car is newer. It doesn't narrow when the driver has credentials. The question this story forces us to ask is simple. What exactly would it take? Officer Chad Miller activated his lights at 8:42 a.m. The dashcam timestamp is precise. What it doesn't capture is the 30 seconds before, the moment he ran the Tesla's plates, received a clean return, and activated his lights anyway. Kimberly saw the cruiser in her mirror and moved smoothly to the right shoulder, the way you do when you've done nothing wrong and have no reason to think otherwise. She put the car in park, lowered both front windows, placed her hands on the wheel at 10 and 2. Miller stepped out at 8:43. He approached on the driver's side, one hand loose near his duty belt, moving with the particular deliberateness that isn't urgency but is meant to feel like it. He stopped closer than procedure requires, close enough that she had to look up at an angle to meet his eyes. She recognized the posture. She had seen it in deposition footage. She had described it in briefs. She felt her shoulders tighten and made a conscious decision to keep them still. California Highway Patrol. Ma'am, this vehicle has been flagged as stolen. Step out of the car. Kimberly kept her voice even. Officer, I'm Senator Kimberly Martinez. This is my vehicle, registered in my name. My Senate ID is clipped to the visor right above me, and my registration is in the glove box. I'm happy to provide everything you need. Miller didn't look at the visor. I'm going to need you to step out. We'll sort out the paperwork at the vehicle. Officer, the badge is right there. Would you like me to hand it to you? What I'd like is for you to step out of the vehicle, ma'am. This is the moment the law calls a threshold on a where reasonable suspicion either exists or it doesn't. A clean plate return, a visible government credential, an immediate calm offer of documentation. The body camera is recording all of it. And still the word stolen stays in the air like it was never going to move regardless of what she said. That is not procedure. That is a conclusion dressed up as an investigation. Kimberly stepped out of the vehicle. She had made that calculation in the span of 3 seconds. The same calculation black drivers have been making on the shoulders of American highways for generations. Comply first, dispute later. Stay alive for the courtroom. She stood beside the Tesla, hands visible at her sides, and spoke with the precision of someone who had spent a decade arguing constitutional law in front of judges. Officer Miller, I want to be cooperative. I also want to be clear. What specific articulable facts gave you reasonable suspicion that this vehicle was stolen? Because a clean plate return is not a basis for this stop. Miller's jaw tightened. You want to do this out here? On the side of the road? I want to understand the legal basis for this stop. That's not a difficult question. Ma'am, why don't you save the law school speech and just let me do my job? She didn't flinch. She had heard variations of that sentence in depositions, in interrogatories, in the testimony of officers who confused authority with correctness. She recognized it for what it was, not an answer. Miller reached for his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I've got a 1038 on I-5 northbound near Elk Grove. Subject is non-compliant. Requesting backup. Non-compliant. She had handed him her Senate badge. She had offered her registration. She was standing exactly where he asked her to stand, hands where he could see them, voice steady enough to be recorded cleanly. Non-compliant. She felt something move through her, not panic, not rage, but a cold and clarifying recognition. She had written testimony about this word, about how it migrated from fact to justification in the space of a radio transmission. She knew exactly where this was heading, and knowing didn't make it easier to stand still. 2 cars back, the rideshare driver had pulled onto the shoulder. He later told investigators he wasn't sure why he stopped. He said something felt wrong. His phone was already in his hand. Across the right lane, a woman in a white Camry had slowed almost to a stop. She raised her phone above the steering wheel and pressed record. The dashcam was recording, the bodycam was recording, 2 civilian phones were recording. And Miller had not yet looked at the Senate badge on the visor. In civil rights litigation, video evidence doesn't just support a case. It determines whether a case exists at all. Prior to widespread smartphone recording, complaints like this one were resolved in favor of the officer more than 80% of the time. What changed wasn't the law. What changed was that the encounter stopped being his word against hers. Every phone that went up on that shoulder was a constitutional check that no policy had managed to install. Citizens recording is not interference. In cases like this one, it is the entire record. 2 additional CHP units arrived within 4 minutes, then a third. By 8:51 a.m., there were 5 officers on that shoulder, 5 patrol vehicles with lights running. Kimberly Martinez was standing in the middle of it, her Tesla behind her. the morning commute bleeding past at reduced speed as drivers craned their necks to see what was happening. Miller briefed the arriving officers with his back partially turned to her, as though she couldn't hear or as though it didn't matter if she could. Subject claims to be a state senator, refusing to provide documentation. Plates came back clean, but the vehicle was flagged in a separate report. She's been uncooperative since contact. Kimberly heard every word. She had provided documentation. The badge was still on the visor. The registration was still in the glove box, offered and refused twice. She tried once more, methodically. The way she'd been trained, not as a senator, but as an attorney who understood that the record being built in this moment would matter later. I have my Senate ID, my driver's license, my registration, and proof of insurance. I also have the Tesla ownership app on my phone, which shows this vehicle titled in my name. I am asking to speak with a supervising officer. One of the backup officers, Unit 52, identifiable on the dashcam, responded without looking up from his notepad. Supervisor's been notified. We're going to need you to come with us while we verify the vehicle. You can verify it right now. The information is in the car. Ma'am, we'll sort it out at the station. I want to call my office. You'll have that opportunity. They did not give her that opportunity. She asked for a supervisor. She was told one had been notified. She asked for the legal basis for her continued detention. She was told it was standard procedure. She asked to call her chief of staff. She was told she could call from the station. Each response was delivered in the flat, procedural tone that is designed to sound like process while functioning as a wall. Kimberly Martinez stood on the shoulder of Interstate 5 and understood with complete clarity that she had reached the edge of what words could do. She had litigated cases where her clients described exactly this moment. The moment the system stops pretending to listen. She had believed them. She had argued their cases. She had won some of them. She had never stood inside the moment herself. She thought about her children, about what it would mean for them if this went further, about the videos she had seen of encounters that escalated past the point of no return on roadsides exactly like this one. She turned around, placed her hands behind her back, and spoke clearly at full volume for every camera recording. I am Senator Kimberly A. Martinez, California State Senate, District 6. I am a U.S. citizen. I am complying under protest. This detention is unlawful, and I will be pursuing every legal remedy available to me. Miller stepped forward and applied the handcuffs. The dashcam captures the sound. 2 clicks close together, tight. She didn't pull away. She didn't speak again. She stood straight and let the footage record what compliance looks like when it costs everything to give it. She knew the law. She cited the law. She offered the evidence. She requested a supervisor. She complied without resistance. She announced her identity on camera, and she was handcuffed on the shoulder of a California interstate at 8:53 on a Wednesday morning. If that sequence of facts doesn't meet your definition of a constitutional violation, ask yourself honestly, what would? They put her in the back of Miller's cruiser at 8:54 a.m. The door closed with the particular finality of a door that only opens from the outside. During the 12-minute drive to the CHP field office, Kimberly said 4 things. She said them slowly, deliberately, for the body camera mounted on the dash partition between the front and rear seats. I am Senator Kimberly A. Martinez, California State Senate, District 6. I am being transported against my will following an unlawful detention on Interstate 5 northbound. The time is approximately 8:55 a.m. I have not been informed of any charge. She said it again at the 5-minute mark, and again as they pulled into the facility lot. Not because she believed anyone in that vehicle was listening, because the camera was. Through the rear window, she could see the rideshare driver's car still parked on the shoulder. His phone still raised. Processing took 11 minutes. An officer she hadn't seen before recorded her name, height, weight, and a small scar on her left forearm she'd had since childhood. They inventoried her personal effects and placed them in a manila envelope. Her Senate identification badge, her driver's license, her wedding ring, her phone, $43 in cash, and a folded copy of a committee agenda with margin notes in blue ink. She watched them seal the envelope. Has anyone contacted my office? My chief of staff's number is in my phone. I need someone to verify my employment and my identity. We'll get to it. I was supposed to preside over a committee session at 10 a.m. People are going to notice I'm not there. Just cooperate and this moves faster. I am cooperating. I've been cooperating since the moment Officer Miller approached my vehicle. I want to speak to a supervisor and I am entitled to a phone call. You'll have your chance. They moved her to a holding room at 9:18 a.m. Roughly 10 feet by 10 feet. Concrete bench along one wall, fluorescent light overhead that emitted a faint, continuous hum that she would later describe in her deposition as the most disorienting part of the entire experience. Not the handcuffs, not the processing, but that sound. Unvarying, indifferent. She sat down and looked at the wall where a clock should have been. There was no clock. She estimated the time by what she knew. Her committee session started at 10. Her chief of staff would call her cell at 9:45 when she didn't check in. Her cell was in a manila envelope in another room. At the other end of the Capitol, 7 colleagues were arranging themselves around a hearing table, pouring water into glasses, waiting for the chair to call the session to order. The chair was sitting on a concrete bench listening to a fluorescent light hum. She had spent 11 years building a record inside this system. Legislation, litigation, testimony, awards. She had a framed letter from the governor on the wall of her district office. She had argued civil rights cases in federal court. She had won. None of it was in that room with her. In that room, there was only the bench and the light and the absolute silence of a system that had stopped pretending to see her. 2 hours and 17 minutes. That is how long Kimberly Martinez sat in that room before anyone came to speak with her. Not long by the standards of wrongful detention cases, not long by almost any measure except one. She had done nothing. She had committed no crime, violated no law, ignored no lawful order. 2 hours and 17 minutes is not a number. It is a choice someone made and kept making every minute she sat there. The door opened at 11:11 a.m., 2 hours and 17 minutes after they put her in the room. CHP Watch. Commander Sergeant Dennis Hara entered first. He was holding a manila folder against his chest the way people hold things when they wish they were holding something else. He didn't make eye contact when he came through the door. He made it when he had no other option. Senator Martinez, we've verified your identity and your employment. You're free to go. Kimberly did not move toward the door. She stood slowly the way you stand when you've been sitting on concrete and you're choosing not to show that it hurt. She looked directly at Hara and let the silence sit for a moment. You've verified my identity. Officer Miller, I told him my identity at 8:43 this morning. I held my Senate badge up to him. I offered my registration, my license, my insurance, and the ownership documentation on my phone. What exactly did you verify at 11:11 that you could not verify at 8:43? Hara's jaw moved slightly before the words came. There was a miscommunication in how the initial report was logged. The flagged VIN didn't match your vehicle on recheck. It was a system error? A system error. Yes, ma'am. She looked at him for a long moment. I want the badge numbers of every officer who had contact with me today. I want the names of every person present at that stop. I want copies of all dashcam and body camera footage before it is reviewed, edited, or archived. I want a written report detailing the specific basis for my initial detention. And I want to file a formal complaint before I leave this building. Hara reached into the folder and produced a business card. He held it out with the careful gesture of a man who understands he is being documented. If you'd like to file a complaint, Internal Affairs handles that process. This has the direct contact. Sergeant Hara. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I have been a civil rights attorney. I have filed complaints with Internal Affairs. I have litigated cases against Internal Affairs findings. I know exactly what that card is and what it is designed to do. You will be hearing from my attorney, and I would strongly suggest that every piece of footage from this morning is preserved in full. She picked up the business card. She walked out of the room. The fluorescent light kept humming behind her. In those 2 hours and 17 minutes, something shifted that a settlement cannot fully address. Kimberly Martinez had spent 11 years operating on the belief that credentials created a different kind of encounter, that the badge, the title, the decade of service built a layer of institutional recognition that the system extended to its own. What she learned on that concrete bench is what her clients had been telling her for years. The system does not recognize its own when its own is black. The credential was on the visor. It was never the variable that mattered. Kimberly Martinez signed the property release form at 11:19 a.m. She took the manila envelope, checked each item against the inventory list with the methodical attention of someone who understood that this document was already evidence, and walked out of the CHP field office into late morning light. Her Tesla was still on the shoulder of I-5 where she'd left it. A CHP unit had remained at the scene. She requested a ride back from the processing officer without looking at him when she asked. A patrol car drove her in silence. She sat in her own vehicle for 3 minutes before starting it. Later, she would say she needed to confirm that she could, that the morning hadn't taken that from her too. She drove directly to the Capitol. Her chief of staff, Raymond Chu, had spent the previous 2 hours making calls that ranged from confused to frantic. When she walked through the office door at 12:04 p.m., he stopped mid-sentence on a phone call, looked at her for a moment, and quietly told the person on the line he'd call them back. She gave him the account without editorializing. Dates, times, badge numbers, sequence of events. The kind of recitation you learn in law school and never expect to use about yourself. Chu listened with the stillness of someone who is angry and knows that being angry is not what the moment needs. Kim, I don't have a word for what this is. What do you need? I need you to preserve every piece of communication that came through this office between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. Every call log, every message, every missed notification, and I need Marcus's number. Marcus Belfield had spent 22 years as a civil rights litigator. He had argued before the Ninth Circuit. He had taken on CHP twice in the previous decade, once resulting in a departmental consent decree. He met Kimberly at her district office at 2:30 that afternoon. He reviewed her account, the badge number she'd written down from memory, and the timeline she'd reconstructed in the car on the way back. This is about as clean as these cases get. You have Dashcam, bodycam, 2 civilian recordings, a rideshare driver who pulled over and observed, and a processing record that shows every request you made and every non-response. They had every opportunity to verify your identity on that shoulder, and they made a series of deliberate choices not to. What does the timeline look like? Federal civil rights cases, 2 years minimum. Probably closer to 3 before trial. They'll come with a settlement offer inside 6 months. Low. They always start low. I'm not settling. Belfield looked at her steadily. I need you to understand what they'll do. They'll go through every case you ever litigated. Every complaint ever filed in your district. Every vote that anyone opposed. They will build a version of you that justifies what Miller did, and they will leak pieces of it to anyone who will print it. They'll make you defend your record while you're trying to prosecute theirs. Kimberly picked up the pen from his desk and set it back down. Marcus, I've spent 11 years telling people to trust the process. I have a file of letters from clients who did everything right and still lost. I'm not settling. I want a trial. I want Miller on the stand. I want every dismissed complaint in front of a jury. That's what I want. Then that's what we'll build. This is the moment the case bifurcates. On one side, a senator, an attorney, 11 years of public service, 4 cameras, 6 witnesses, and a timeline that holds. On the other side, an institution whose first instinct in every case like this is not accountability. It is management. The question is never whether they did it. The question is always whether the cost of admitting it exceeds the cost of fighting it. For 2 years, the California Highway Patrol was about to find out which way that math ran. The first offer arrived 9 weeks after Belfield filed the federal complaint, $150,000, a number delivered through the state attorney's office in a letter that used the phrase, without admission of wrongdoing, 4 times in 2 pages. Kimberly read it once and put it face down on her desk. The second offer came 4 months later, $600,000. Same language, same structure. A number designed to feel significant enough to end the conversation without being large enough to signal that anything serious had occurred. She declined it in a single paragraph. The third offer, $1.8 million, arrived 14 months in, during the period when CHP's legal team had begun reviewing the civilian footage and understood for the first time what a jury was going to see. Belfield called her when it came through. It's getting serious on their end. $1.80 is not a we didn't do anything number. That's a we know exactly what we did number. What do you recommend? Professionally, I think we can get significantly more at trial. Personally, I think you should decide what this was always about. Then we go to trial. United States District Court, Eastern District of California. Judge Patricia Okonkwo presiding. The trial began on a Tuesday morning, 26 months after the stop on Interstate 5. Day 3 was the footage. Belfield played the Dashcam recording first, then the bodycam, then the rideshare driver's phone video. 3 angles of the same 4 minutes, each one filling in what the others left out. The courtroom watched Miller approach the Tesla. They watched Kimberly hold up her Senate badge. They watched Miller not look at it. They watched 5 patrol vehicles accumulate on a highway shoulder around a woman in a navy blazer who had her hands visible the entire time. Juror 4, a woman in her 50s who had been taking consistent notes since opening statements, stopped writing. She put her pen down and did not pick it up again for the remainder of the footage. 2 jurors in the back row exchanged a look that Belfield would later describe as the moment he knew. Miller took the stand on day 5. Belfield approached the lectern without notes. Officer Miller, when you ran Senator Martinez's plates at 8:41 a.m., what was the result of that query? The plates came back registered. Registered to whom? To the vehicle owner. And did the registration flag the vehicle as stolen? There was a separate report in the system. I asked about the plate query. The query you ran at 8:41. Did that query return a stolen vehicle flag? A pause. No? So, when you activated your lights at 8:42, you had a clean plate return, correct? There were other factors. What other factors? Miller shifted slightly. The vehicle, the area, my experience, and discretion as a patrol officer. The vehicle. Can you describe the vehicle? A Tesla, black. A new Tesla, driven by a black woman on Interstate 5 during morning commute traffic. Those were your other factors? The state's attorney objected. Judge Okonkwo sustained it on form and instructed Belfield to rephrase. He nodded. Officer Miller, outside of the vehicle's make and the driver's appearance, what specific articulable facts supported your belief that the vehicle was stolen at the moment you initiated the stop? The silence lasted long enough that Judge Okonkwo looked up from her notes. I used my discretion based on the totality of the circumstances. Totality of the circumstances, but you cannot name a single specific articulable fact. I had discretion. Thank you. No further questions. The jury had just watched a 6-year veteran of the California Highway Patrol testify, under oath, that he could not name a single specific fact that justified the stop. Not one. What they also could not change, what no verdict could touch, was that Miller's 4 prior complaints had each been dismissed by the same internal process that is designed to protect the institution from exactly this kind of reckoning. The jury was about to hold one officer accountable. The system that kept him on the road for 6 years was going to walk out of that courtroom the same way it walked in. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 11 minutes. In a case with 3 camera angles, 6 witnesses, a processing record, and a defendant who could not name a single articulable fact justifying the stop. 4 hours and 11 minutes. Kimberly sat at the plaintiff's table and kept her hands folded. Belfield had told her early in the process that verdicts feel different than you expect them to. That winning doesn't feel like winning when the thing you won was something you never should have had to fight for. She understood that intellectually. She was about to understand it the other way. The 4-person stood. Liable on all counts. Compensatory damages, $2.4 million for unlawful detention, violation of constitutional rights, emotional distress, and damage to professional reputation. Punitive damages, $5 million assessed against the California Highway Patrol, intended to deter future misconduct of the same character. Total, $7.4 million. Kimberly did not smile. She did not exhale visibly. She sat with her hands still folded and looked at a point just above the jury box. The money was not what she had come for. The money could not give back the 2 hours and 17 minutes on the concrete bench. It could not undo the sound of handcuff clicks recorded on a dashcam on Interstate 5. It could not restore what her children would one day be old enough to understand had happened to their mother on a Wednesday morning when she was on her way to work. The $7.4 million would be paid by California taxpayers. Chad Miller would not write a check. He would not see the inside of a criminal courtroom. There are no criminal statutes that were triggered by what he did. Because what he did, the law calls a civil matter. Miller was terminated from the California Highway Patrol within 30 days of the verdict. He was added to the Brady List, the registry of officers whose credibility has been formally impaired, making them essentially unable to testify in criminal proceedings. The internal affairs investigation into his 4 prior dismissed complaints was reopened. Those cases were reviewed. The families involved were notified. The California Highway Patrol implemented mandatory bias and vehicle verification protocol training statewide. VIN verification procedures were updated to require confirmation before any felony stop designation. The Independent Civilian Review Board had its oversight authority expanded. CHP was required to publish quarterly demographic data on stops and searches, data they had previously reported only internally. These were not small changes, they were also not fast ones. They came 2 years and 3 months after a woman held up a Senate badge on the shoulder of a highway and was handcuffed anyway. Kimberly Martinez submitted her resignation from the California State Senate 8 months after the verdict. In her letter, she cited a desire to pursue advocacy outside of the legislative structure. In an interview given several weeks later, she was more direct. I spent 11 years writing laws inside a system I believed was capable of enforcing them equally. I don't have that belief anymore. Not because of one officer, because of what happened to every complaint filed against that officer before mine. Because of how long it took the institution to respond. Because I know that if I hadn't had cameras, attorneys, colleagues, and a title, I would have been a complaint that was dismissed for insufficient evidence. I can't legislate from inside that. So I'm going to do something else. If you believe that a Senate badge on a visor should have ended this before it started, share this story. If you think that $7.4 million paid by taxpayers while the institution walks unchanged is not accountability, say so in the comments. And if you have ever been made to feel that your credentials, your compliance, your dignity, your presence somewhere you had every legal right to be, were not enough, drop your story below. This community sees you. And these stories matter because the ones that don't get filmed still happen every day. Kimberly Martinez used a significant portion of the settlement to establish the Martinez Civil Rights Documentation Project, a nonprofit built on a single premise, that the gap between what the law promises and what people experience on the street is, at its core, an evidence problem. 3 years after that Wednesday morning on Interstate 5, the organization has trained over 14,000 people across California in lawful documentation of police encounters, know your rights protocols, and evidence preservation. It has funded legal defense in 340 cases where individuals face charges or civil rights violations with no resources to contest them. It has successfully lobbied for 3 pieces of state legislation, including a bill requiring independent review of all officer complaints before administrative dismissal, the precise mechanism that kept Chad Miller's prior record invisible until it wasn't. Kimberly still speaks. At law schools and community centers and occasionally at police academies that are willing to have an honest conversation about what discretion looks like from the other side of it. She is not interested in easy reconciliation. She is interested in structural change, which is slower and less satisfying. And the only thing that actually works, $7.4 million, did not heal what happened on that road. It didn't give me back the 2 hours on that bench. It didn't undo what my children will one day understand about what this country asked their mother to prove before it would treat her like a person. But it gave me the resources to make sure that the next person sitting in that room, on that bench, under that light, wondering if anyone is coming, has somewhere to turn. I'll keep building that somewhere until the bench is empty, until the stop doesn't happen, until the badge on the visor is the end of the story, not the beginning of a fight. If you believe that compliance should be enough, share this story. If you think accountability means more than a settlement paid by people who weren't in the room, tell us in the comments. And if you have ever sat in a space where you had every right to be and been made to feel that you needed to prove it, we see you. Subscribe, because these stories don't end when the verdict comes in. They end when the stops stop. And we're not there yet.